Picture this. It's the spring of 1944. Nazi Germany is feeling the pressure from all sides. And yet, Adolf Hitler was feeling pretty confident. He was convinced that the massive Allied invasion everyone knew was coming was actually his golden opportunity to crush his enemies in the West and throw them back into the sea for good.
You see, for Hitler and his top generals, this wasn't just another battle. They called it the Entscheidungsschlacht, the decisive battle. Everything, and I mean everything, was riding on them being able to smash the invasion right as it hit the beaches of Fortress Europe. So that's the big question, right? With so much at stake, how did they fail? Well, that's what we're going to break down here. And the answer is a fascinating story of huge mistakes that started way before the first Allied boot ever touched the sand. The truth is, the seeds for Germany's failure on D-Day were planted deep inside its own high command. There was a fundamental disagreement, a fatal flaw, really, in the whole design of Fortress Europe. So you've got this major clash of ideas between two of their top guys. On one side, you have the famous Desert Fox, Field Marshal Erwin Rommel. He was absolutely sure the only way to win was to hit the Allies the second they landed, stop them cold at the water's edge with Panzer tanks right there on the coast. But on the other side, you had Field Marshal von Rundstedt. His plan was the total opposite. Let them land, let them move inland a bit, and then, bam, encircle and destroy them with a massive tank force held way back in reserve. So what happens when your top generals can't agree? You get a compromise. And in this case, it was a truly terrible one. Rommel got a few tanks, but the most powerful panzer divisions were kept way back. And here's the kicker. They could only be moved with Hitler's direct, personal permission. This one decision, putting the fate of the battle in the hands of one man hundreds of miles away, would turn out to be absolutely catastrophic. Now, while the Germans were arguing amongst themselves, the Allies were putting the finishing touches on Operation Overlord. And it was a masterpiece. They picked Normandy, but they created this huge, brilliant deception campaign with a fake army to convince the Germans the real attack was coming at Calais. They were going to use airborne troops, crazy new kinds of specialist tanks, and get this, they were even bringing their own portable harbors to make sure supplies could get in. Okay, so the stage is set, but the invasion, it didn't start with ships hitting the beach. It started in the dead of night, in the dark hours of June 6th, from the skies above Normandy. The very first troops to land in France were British and Canadian paratroopers. Even though they were scattered all over the place in the dark, they pulled off something incredible. They captured these vital bridges, securing the eastern side of the whole invasion area. But here's the catch. Now these lightly armed soldiers had to hold those bridges against German tanks. So how on earth does a paratrooper stop a panzer? Well, they had this little beauty, the PIAT. Think of it as a shoulder-fired mortar. Now, it took some serious guts to use because you had to get really, really close to a tank to fire it, but it gave one soldier the power to knock out a monster. And this thing was a game changer. Take this story about Sergeant Thornton. He sees a German tank rolling up to a key bridge. Just as his officer is about to order a desperate grenade attack, Thornton fires his Piat and just knocks the tank out cold. The Germans, totally stunned, pulled back, thinking they were up against heavy artillery. One shot from one guy helped save the entire flank. But while the British were having these incredible targeted successes, the American airborne drop on the other flank was pure chaos. Low clouds and equipment problems meant the 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions were scattered all over the countryside. But funnily enough, that chaos actually worked in their favor, in a way, because the German defenders on the ground had no idea where the Americans were or what was going on. All right, so the paratroopers are on the ground, fighting in the dark. As the sun comes up, the main event kicks off, the largest amphibious assault in human history. But what happened on one beach was wildly different from what happened just a few miles away. Let's start at Utah Beach, which is really a story of incredible luck. The strong currents actually pushed the landing craft off course. But guess what? They ended up landing in an area that was much more lightly defended than their original target. And the result? Just look at that number. An astonishingly low casualty count for an invasion of this size. The commanders on the ground realized the mistake, rolled with it, and secured the beach quickly. But just down the coast, a complete horror story was unfolding. This was Omaha Beach. Of all the landing zones, this was the toughest. It was dominated by these 150-foot-high cliffs, which gave the German defenders a perfect high ground, a perfect killing field. It was a death trap. So, why was it so bad? Well, it was a perfect storm of disaster. Literally everything that could go wrong did. The bombing beforehand completely missed the German defenses. The special amphibious tanks that were supposed to give the infantry cover, almost all of them sank in the rough waves. And waiting for them on the cliffs were dug-in German machine gunners with the MG-42, a weapon so terrifying they nicknamed it Hitler's buzzsaw.
And the cost was just staggering, over 2,400 casualties. Compare that to the 197 at Utah. It's just night and day. For hours, the entire landing at Omaha was on the verge of complete and total failure. Thankfully, over on the British and Canadian beaches, Gold, Juno, and Sword, the fight was tough, but things went much, much better. A huge reason for that was their specialized tanks, these wild contraptions called Hobart's funnies. There were tanks that could clear minefields, lay down bridges, and smash bunkers, paving the way for the infantry and saving countless lives.
Okay, so this brings us right back to that huge central question. The Allies are pinned down, they are fighting for their very lives on Omaha Beach. So, where were the panzers? Where was that big, decisive German counterattack?
This timeline right here tells you everything you need to know. It shows the fatal paralysis at the very heart of the German command. The first paratroopers land around 1 in the morning. The main landings hit the beaches at 6:30 a.m. And for hours, the German commanders on the ground are screaming for those panzer reserves. But Hitler, the only man who could release them, was asleep. No one dared wake him. He isn't told about the invasion until the afternoon, and only then does he finally give the order. By then, the critical window of opportunity was slamming shut.
So what about the tanks that were nearby? Well, the 21st Panzer Division attacked on its own that afternoon. But it was too little, too late. Without any support, they drove right into a wall of Allied firepower. They were beaten back, losing over half their tanks in the process. The one counterattack they managed was piecemeal and completely ineffective.
And with the failure of that counterattack, Germany's best chance to destroy the invasion on the beaches was gone. The Allies had their foothold, and they weren't about to let it go.
From that point on, the Allies just relentlessly built up their position. By June 12th, they'd linked up all 5 beaches, creating this massive, solid front. An unstoppable flood of soldiers and supplies began pouring into France. All the while, Allied planes, which had total control of the sky, just hammered any German reinforcements trying to get to the battle.
So, when you look back, the story of D-Day is one of incredible Allied planning, innovation, and just unbelievable bravery. But you cannot ignore the fact that its success was made possible. It was amplified by a series of critical German failures: a divided command, a paralyzed decision-making process, and a fatal delay at the worst possible moment. The Allies were ashore to stay. But with the beaches secured, the next big question was, how would they ever break out and overcome the brutal, bloody fight waiting for them in the hedgerows of Normandy?